So, if you've been following my book reviews, you'll notice that it's been a long time since I've talked about The Phantom of the Opera. So, because it took so long, you might think that this book must have been quite a slog for me to get through. On the contrary, I rather enjoyed it. The only problem is, I just couldn't really find the time to read it. Summertime is my busy season, and as soon as I came home from work, I just wanted to go to bed. And so I just kind of read this in spare times here and there, but when I did, I had a fair bit of fun with it. So I've had a little experience with the story of the Phantom of the Opera. When the movie based off of, I want to say it was Andrew Lloyd Webber who came up with the play version, when that movie came out in the early 2000s, my sister was just obsessed with it and watched it all the time. As such, I was able to watch quite a few scenes here and there, some of which I could remember appearing in the book as well, which I will get to. To start off with, this book is written in a rather unique narrative style. So from the preface, I've gathered the author, and bear with me because I don't know how French pronounce this, but I want to say his name is Gaston Leroux, or something like that. I would guess that the X is silent, from what little I know about French. He was actually a newspaper writer, and that very much shows in the way that he wrote this book. It was very much as if he was writing a great expose, and this was like a thesis statement. The idea of the Phantom being this one story that everybody wanted to read. He dug up as many sources as he could, and when one source would dry it out, another source would take its place. So, for example, there'd be instances where one of the characters would be like, and then this guy went off like crazy. And so they interviewed the guy that went off like crazy, and that's what kept the story going. It's a rather unique style, and I don't think I've seen it in any other book I've read. So the basic story is actually quite a fair bit of detail in here due to the changing perspectives. So we have two new managers of the Opera House getting orientation from the old managers as to what needs to be done in order to keep everything running smoothly. Everything seems so far so good until they bring out this odd memorandum book written in a very shaky red pen, which is ascribed to the opera ghost, sometimes known as the OG. I highly doubt Gaston meant original gangster back in 1910, but it was still a fun thing to note. The demands that the opera ghost wants is that box number 5 will always be his at his disposal, and once a month the amount of 20,000 francs is to be paid directly to him for tribute. In satisfying all these conditions, he is not going to disturb the play. If these conditions are not satisfied, mysterious things have known to happen, like right before the two managers took over. The old ones had to deal with a mysterious hanging of one of the prop crews. And that right there is where the book begins. It's interviewing a whole bunch of the dancers held up inside one of the dressing rooms, going over what they have seen of the opera ghost. From what they can tell, he has two different forms. One of them is a head that looks like a skull, and the other looks like it is just a floating head that is on fire. And all the while, there's so many that have spotted them that they're kind of afraid to leave the dressing room. But when they do, they tell about the hanging as well as all these other details to the old managers. Now, when the new managers hear about all this, they obviously think it's some kind of joke, and once they get all the keys, they figure they're going to do an investigation. After all, I don't know what 20,000 francs would convert to in today's money, but back in 1910, I'd wager that's quite a fair bit. So the first thing they do is just don't pay the tribute for about a month or two, to which they seem to receive these letters written in the same pen as the memorandum, basically saying, hey, you're new, so I'm gonna let you go, but you really need to owe me that money. and threatening to give a bit of a demonstration as well. Once again, they're not buying this, so they figure, why don't they just rent out box number 5? The people that bought it ran out screaming in the middle of the performance. So, the two managers themselves decide to go there, to which they get this uneasy feeling. When all of a sudden a voice kind of comes out of nowhere saying, "You are in my seat. Get out." To which even they start getting a little scared. However, they're still rather skeptical, so the ghost decides to give a bit of a demonstration. The opera being played is called Faust. I don't know a lot about it, but there's something about that name that sounds very familiar. When all of a sudden, in the middle of the performance, the lead singer, while trying to hold out a high note, all of a sudden starts sounding like a bullfrog. So it's something like, "Ah!" And so they try it again, to which another bullfrog sound comes away. Embarrassed, she then immediately leaves the stage. And then from here, we go into the second part of the story, her understudy, known as Christine Day. I think that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. But I just have to laugh that her name is Christine, especially after the last book review I did. She is a talent that has seemingly come out of nowhere. Her father was really big into music, and that's basically all the child grew up on. Along with this story about the idea of this angel of music that'll come down and grant her the power to sing better than anybody has ever sung before. On the dad's deathbed, he says that he is going to send the angel of music to her, and she has waited for many years for such a presence to be able to occur. And the other important thing to note is a childhood friend. Let me see if I can say this right. So his first name is Raoul, and it is Comte del Cheney, I want to say his name is. I just always stuck out on that Cheney part, because when this was first made into a movie, Lon Chaney was the person playing the opera ghost, which I just found that to be a little too much of a coincidence. So both have gotten a lot older, and all of a sudden this Christine is becoming this fantastic singer that everybody's just like, well, how come we never do this before? She was just an understudy. She was good, but she wasn't fantastic. But all of a sudden she was just blowing everyone away. And wouldn't you know that the Cheneys, he also has an older brother, Victor, I believe. I have a hard time remembering the names, I'm not going to lie. Often go to the opera, and there Raoul spots Christine, where they start to kind of reignite a bit of an old flame they have. However, Christine is being very mysterious. I guess you could maybe even use the term coy. Because while they talk, it seems like she is trying to avoid any sort of romance that Raoul puts out to her. This seems a little strange. So when Christine takes a bit of a trip to visit her father's grave, he decides to follow her in secret. The interesting thing is that when she gets to the gravesite, there is a violin on the dad's tomb, but she was a violinist, that's all of a sudden playing by itself. Raoul tries to investigate further, when all of a sudden he is knocked out and finds himself outstretched on an altar, just barely clinging on to life. The only thing he is able to spot is the person that almost tried to sacrifice him, who is known as the Red Death. Raoul slowly recovers and then tries to pick up a correspondence with Christine again, which she is a little more responsive with. She invites him to this masked ball, where there is one rather unique attendant with a mask over most of his face and a monogrammed jacket that says Red Death, to which Raoul wants to seek revenge, but Christine is trying everything in her power to make it so the Red Death does not meet Raoul again. She tries to explain a few things, but it's very mysteriously, when all of a sudden Raoul notices that she has a plain gold ring on her finger, as if she has been proposed to somebody. When Raoul asks about it, all of a sudden Christine is like, No, no, I'm not taking that ring off. This is mine. This is mine alone. Don't you dare touch it. And don't you dare talk to the Red Death either. To which Raoul at one point also wants to get the Red Death, but also to be able to confront Christine. But he softens up a little bit and agrees to her wishes. Not long after, she disappears for a few weeks when all of a sudden she appears at the house of her adopted mother, to which she says something rather mysteriously that the angel of music doesn't exist. This is quite in stark contrast because she believed up until that point that she was seeing the angel of music, which is also the same person as the Red Death. It seemed as almost like a spell was on her, and now she was finally free to be able to live her life. However, when Raoul brings up the ring again, once again she is very defensive and refuses to take it off. After a few days, they get to talking again when Christine reveals all. It appears that the person she thought was the angel of music, the Red Death, lives under the opera, where there is a lake, a cottage, a house, and a maze that only a select few have ever been able to get through, and also explains her coyness. The angel of music, which I think I'll just call him the Phantom of the Opera to make it easier, basically abducted Christine, and with his very sweet voice, she was very much convinced that he was the angel of music, until several events proved otherwise. So the first is the gold ring. The Phantom was very forceful about this and said that you must forever wear this ring, otherwise I will kill Raoul. As well as basically saying no matter where you go, I will track you down if you do not keep wearing this ring. For the most part, it's a rather abusive relationship like that. It wasn't like that at the very beginning. The main thing that set it off is he's working on this opera of his own based off of Don Juan. The Phantom has always worn a mask over his face. However, in that moment when he started playing bits and pieces of this opera, she just couldn't resist and takes off the mask to reveal what looks like a death's head. Basically just a skull with two big holes where the nose should be and bright yellow eyes. The ugliness repulses her, to which the Phantom says, now that you know what I really look like, you will remain here forever. However, with enough persuading, she is able to find a way to be able to convince him that she can leave. That is why she disappeared, and that is how she became free once again. Raoul then wants everything in his power to be able to kill this very monster that has done all these awful things to Christine. However, Christine doesn't really see it that way that much. She kind of has a bit of a soft spot for him. And one of the main demands that Phantom of the Opera made was that she would go on with one last performance. To which Raoul's just like, are you crazy? He's just going to take you away. We need to take you now. To which Christine's like, no, that would be too heartless. Too heartless. To the man who abducted you, threatened death to the person that you know you love, as well as basically all these other things, and you feel sorry for him. I just couldn't buy that myself. I'm with Raoul. I'm just like, get away from this man before he ruins your life more. But, just like Raoul predicted, the Phantom came in the middle of the performance and made off with her. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. As Raoul is trying his best to figure out where in the world Christine and the Phantom went, he bumps into a mysterious character simply known as the Persian, who is the only person that believes Raoul's story about the idea of a house, a lake, and a maze of just everything underneath the opera. And somehow, he knows the very construction of the opera itself, knows all the secret passages that the Phantom used, and is able to make his way into the depths of the Opera House. Now, the main thing to keep in mind is that the Persian says you must forever keep your hand at the level of your eye. The main reason for this is that the Phantom is very good at tying nooses and has often come behind the victim and tried to strangle them. However, if you have your hand at your eye, then the rope would go around the hand, and thus you would still be able to breathe. That I remember from the movie, as well as all the little letters. And also the side note, while two managers, while they were trying to disprove the opera ghost, basically replaced the one person that was in charge of delivering the 20,000 francs to the ghost. In doing this, the opera ghost is very upset and cuts the chandelier, killing the person that was in the replacement. So there you got the whole chandelier in pieces thing. But the big thing I don't remember from the movie is how Raoul and the Persian were able to get into the Phantom's house. Now, how it happens in the book is that they accidentally descend into the Phantom's torture chamber. Here, because they have so much time, the Persian describes his relationship with the Phantom of the Opera, simply known as Eric. Early childhood is very scarce, but the main thing is because of his hideousness, he always wore a mask, and his parents just hated him, leaving him to run away and making his living off of being in the circus. With this, he was kind of ridiculed, but at the same time, he was a bit of a curiosity because he had a fantastic singing voice, as well as the thirst for blood. Oftentimes, people in the Middle East would call upon him in order to assassinate. And on top of that, he also was able to create numerous torture chambers. One very similar to what they're in now. But the important thing is how the Persian met Eric in the first place. Basically, his thirst for blood had gotten a little too much, and the leader of Persia wanted him executed. However, him being the chief of police was able to sneak him out of the country and ran away with him, and developed a little bit of a friendship until he realized how much of a monster this Eric really is. But he always tried to keep a close eye on him just to make sure that nothing too crazy in terms of that thirst for blood would go. The torture chamber itself is very unique. It is a small hexagonal room where all the walls are mirrors. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot there except for this one tree made out of metal and a little bit of rope. Now, it doesn't seem too crazy at first. The mirrors are pointed in such a way where it looks like you're in this massive room where all of a sudden you start losing your senses, your sense of time. And then on top of that, Eric was able to outfit this particular torture chamber with a high-powered electric light that would bounce off the mirrors and thus make it swelteringly hot in there. In doing so, the pair start to kind of give in to the idea that they've been on this trackless journey through an African jungle for what appeared to be weeks. All while the Persian was trying his best to be able to find a way out of here. Because if he knew the other torture chambers that Eric saw, there would be, for the sick mind, to be able to watch everything that was going on, but also a way to be able to go in and out of it. After what felt like several weeks, they find a way out, where all of a sudden they see this giant storage of barrels. But instead of water like they were hoping for, it's full of gunpowder. To which the pair quickly realizes that if Christine doesn't marry Eric, he is going to blow up everybody in that opera house, including them. Christine does a little bit of diplomacy and is able to keep the opera house from exploding. Instead, the torture chamber is then filled up with water, and it gets to a point where everybody blacks out. When they wake up, they find themselves inside Eric's house, being revived by him. I guess Christine was able to break through enough that he wasn't going to kill the Persian or the person that she actually loved. From there, the opera ghost then visits the Persian in his house, basically saying, I'm going to die. Christine has actually fallen in love with me, but he has fallen in love with Raoul more. So I just put him in a dungeon where nobody can see him. And the whole time, Persian, as well as I, am just kind of like, well, what happened to Raoul? I don't care about your feelings. Ooh, it's the first time you felt love. You are killing the person that she actually loves. Where is he? What have you done with him? However, after enough time, his heart starts to crack, and Raoul and Christine disappear into obscurity, where they can live the rest of their lives. And that's basically where the story ends. But throwing in a different perspective at the very end, basically saying, if Eric was born with a halfway decent face, would he have become the monster that he would have? In fact, it almost seems like the author wants us to kind of feel sorry for Eric, which I just have a hard time doing that. When Raoul tried to take a few shots at him, I was quite annoyed that he didn't actually kill him. Because all throughout the book, this Eric is just described as like a person that you just do not want on this planet. So I just have a hard time pitying him. And so then for the author to be like, you know what? He's kind of a victim of circumstance. I don't know. I feel like even if he were handsome, he probably still would have developed this bloodlust as well as some of this other stuff. Although he might have actually went into, say, the opera business because that voice he had was really fantastic. But I don't know, it could be possible that maybe he still would have discovered his like of torture as well as killing people, so it's really hard to say how much of that is nature versus nurture. And the idea that they put that little debate in here was pretty interesting. So yes, that is the Phantom of the Opera. It's kind of weird reading the book because it seems like the Phantom has almost kind of become this romantic figure, almost like the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. And reading this book, I kind of have a hard time believing that. It seems more like Christine is hypnotized or maybe even being possessed into falling in love with the opera ghost, as opposed to what little I remember from the movie, where it seems like Christine actually does kind of fall in love with her. However, I just can't remember the ending. Maybe I should watch the movie sometime. People tell me it's pretty good. So in the end, would I recommend it? Yeah, definitely. Not only because of its rather unique narrative style, but it is a pretty good story. And obviously I just kind of scratched the surface on the details. I mean, with each character's perspective, you get a different way that the story is told. And also you get different ideas about how different scenes played out. So that is the Phantom of the Opera. I'm not going to make any promises on what my next book review is going to be, but I will definitely try my best to read this next one, the Foundation Trilogy. A lot of people probably know this as being written by Isaac Asimov, the person that wrote the short story of I, Robot, as well as a lot of other famous science fiction works. This one is rather interesting for me because in all the travels I was only ever able to find the first and the third book, and now I have all three in one nice little package. I've read a little bit here and there, and I can tell you right now, I was starting to have a little bit of flashbacks to Dune and the idea that each chapter starts from a quote from a book that just doesn't exist. But I feel like Asimov is more about showing rather than telling, which that was just the main thing I couldn't get behind with Dune. It just seems like he describes everything in such detail and then tells the story. Asimov seems very limited on the details and tells the story. So already I'm getting a lot more vested in this than I was in Dune. But before concluding, here's the last thing I want to show you. The bookmark for this book. The receipt. I still find it interesting. I honestly thought this was a punch card at first, but it appears to be an invoice. I'm not even sure what in the world all these little things are for, but if anybody wants to chime in and give me your theory, feel free to go on ahead. So, until next time, keep having fun.